Just relax and just go with the flow. Everybody.
Meeting will come to order. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the prior year. Those minutes are available for inspection on the website. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Mary Sinkus motions.
Second.
Sandy Fosdix makes the second. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Next order of business is the election. Before you, you see Tom Throne, the chairperson of the election committee. I will allow him to introduce his team. Tom?
Thank you very much. I'm Tom Throne. I'm the election committee chairman. I want to introduce my three committee members, our three stalwarts. We've done this for a number of years. James Miller, Bob Rischel, and Dalkey. And I want to thank them because this has been an interesting 2 election cycles where we've done stuff remotely. So we appreciate all their hard work. And with that, I guess we're ready for the big slide. The election results are in. Jacqueline Gain, Jan Hagan, J.B. Portillo are the winners of 4-year terms, 3-year terms. Mike Abb is the recipient of the 1-year term. We had, of the 35,974 eligible votes, we had 9,136 cast for 25.39% participation. Mr. Chairman, that's the results of this election. Thank you, everybody.
Afternoon. Oh, there we go. We're going to give you a brief recap of 2020 in comparison to 2019. And here we go. All right, here's the financial report. It's the audited financials, and we have our audit team right here. If you could stand up and wave to everybody, I'd appreciate it. All right. And you've been our audit team firm for ever. Really long time. All right, couple notes. The information provided today is from the 2020 audit, plus I drew from some information that was available on the website. So all this information will be available. The board has to vote on the acceptance of the audit at the 27th at 6 p.m. So it's not technically official until the board has voted to accept it. But the audit committee has already reviewed it. They've already recommended to the board to accept it. And then once it's approved, it will be posted to the website. So it's currently not available on the website, but you can get a copy in the back of the room. We made about 40 copies. All right. So first we're going to look at the balance sheet. And you'll see that the graph in green is 2020, and the blue is 2019. And you'll see that the current assets went up. It increased by about $3 million. And that was mainly attributable to cash and restricted cash. We had a very good year. You're going to see that when we cover the P&L. But the cash is up, and so you're seeing that the current assets are up because of that. Property, plant, and equipment decreased by $2.4 million. You have accumulated depreciation, but also this is an indicator that over the last 2 years, we haven't been putting as much money into capital projects, and so that number is going to come down when you don't spend quite as much. In 2019, we had the fire. 2020, we had COVID, so we didn't put as much into capital. The lease, operating leases, those are up by $1 million, and that's a change in the accounting standard, and that's actually covered in the financial report. So total overall assets went up by $1.7 million. So you can see in the graph that comparison, and the graph is eliminating the O's to make it a little bit easier to read. So there's the balance sheet, and there's the liabilities and members' equity. And you'll see that current liabilities increased by $600,000. That was mainly attributable to accounts payable. It wasn't a huge difference, but that was the main driver. And then long-term debt decreased by $500,000. And that's our annual water bond payment that we make. And we're actually going to talk about the water bond payment in just a little bit, because the board elected to make an additional payment of $1 million, but that won't hit until 21. It's already taken place, but it's not reflected in here, other than it's reflected in that restricted cash when we were talking about the assets. Okay. Operating leases, once again, that's that new accounting standard. And then the members' equity, you see the members' equity went up, and that's reflective of the good year that we had, good financial year. So there's your liabilities and members' equity. All right, now we're going to talk about the income statement, what everybody likes to talk about. And you'll see, once again, 2020 is in green and 2019 is in blue. And here you'll see that if you look on the graph, the revenue is up in 2020 and the expenses are down. That's a good combination. It's a really nice combination. So let's look at total revenue. Revenue was up by $2.1 million. A large portion of that was assessment, so $2.2 million. We got the assessment increase passed, that went up. But also, water went up. More people staying at home, using, when you have that many people home all day long, the water usage goes up. And then you have other ones that are going down. In 2019, we had the sale of the cell tower lease. That was $1 million in 19. So we didn't get that in 20, so that actually made that number go down. So I wanted to give you as much information as possible, but the main driver in 2020 was the water and the assessments. Okay, expenses went down. We mentioned that earlier. Well, when you're comparing against 2019 and you don't have a fire, well, that's a good thing. You're spending a heck of a lot less money because you don't have the fire to put out. So you see that the fire expense in 2019 was $2.3 million more than it was in 2020. We still had fire expense in 2020. I think it was about $700,000, but that's $2.3 million less than 19. So a lot less, that's a drain on our resources. We also want to throw in here on the expenses, and want to compliment Stacy here. She was able to secure two different grants totaling $110,000. So that was really nice, and we were able to use that in a lot of different areas. So excess or deficit is in parentheses, of revenue over and expenses, and you'll see that we improved by, $3.6 million. So we went from a negative number in 2019, mainly because of the fire, and then in 2020 we actually had some good numbers. So $3.6 million swing in a year's time. That's really impressive. The team did a very good job. All right, let's talk about cash and restricted cash. So we mentioned earlier how much on current assets went up, and that was because of cash and restricted cash. So first of all, cash went up because we had a solid year. When you're doing well, when your revenue is up and your expenses are down, that preserves a lot of cash, and that's really good. And also, you'll see we fulfilled our obligation. In the 2020 plan, we promised the community that we would put aside $141,000 for reserves by the end of the year, and we did that. Okay, so we wanted to make sure we reference that because that was a commitment the board made to the community, and we fulfilled that commitment. But look at the graph. You see 18, 19, and then 20, it pops way up. So we did really, really well. Water did well also, and we're going to talk about water in just a moment. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a side step real quick. I want to remind everybody, this is the entire POA, including water. If you watch our monthly board meetings, we present the water separately in our monthly meetings. But this is the annual report. So everything is combined together. Because remember, we have one tax ID number, one bank account. I mean, we have more than one bank account, but effectively we have one. It's all in the same company. So this is water and POA combined. Okay. All right. Now, the intercompany loan. Remember when we had to borrow some money, put out the fire, borrowed it from effectively ourselves, the water department, and you'll see that we started the year at $3.5 million at the very beginning of 2020, and we had made a commitment in the 2020 plan. So here's another commitment that was made by the board to the community, is that we would pay down that loan to $3.2 million, and the board was able to pay that down to 2.9. So we actually exceeded that expectation. So that's really good. But we want to always mention this because we made that commitment, and we want to remind everybody, hey, we came through. The board came through, and they fulfilled their obligation to the community. So $2.93 million. All right. Let's talk about a couple key capital projects. It was a thin year, so we didn't do as much as we had wanted to. Remember, we talked about property and equipment, how that number came down. So you see, well, the pickleball courts, those were actually started in 2020. They were just recently completed, and we received a number of very nice emails saying that they're great. In 2020, we did the replacement of the country club roof that was damaged by hail. So the POA had a large deductible, so we paid the deductible, and the insurance company took care of the rest. So that's why I put in parentheses insurance. We had to replace a backhoe. We had to replace a number of mowers, backhoes, and everything. I didn't want to give you the laundry list. These are just kind of the high-level things. But a backhoe is a pretty significant piece of equipment. And then if you remember, in 2020, we had the bridge repair at Scottsdale. That was a rather large project. Going on the other side, we resurfaced the Branchwood Pool, the backside of Lake Point, the portion that has the sun beating down on it all summer long. Well, we had to repaint that. And then the Lambeth Water Tower renovation was actually a 2019 project that was completed in 2020. And Metfield parking lot and the Metfield roof replacement, once again, hail damage. We had to pay the deductible, and the insurance company took care of the rest. So those were the main projects in 2020, not 2021, but 2020. We're all talking about, everything that I've been talking about is last year. Even though we're all the way in May, we're talking about last year. All right, let's talk about amenity usage. Definitely a very strange year because of COVID, and you can see that. Okay, so golf rounds, so you have the zero line, percentage increase or decrease, and you'll see everything in blue is up and everything in red is down. And pretty much you can say everything that was outside was up and everything that was inside was down. Not a surprise on that. So golf rounds up 21% plus, what was that, 29,266 rounds additional in 1 year. That is impressive, and we're still busy. We're still busy right now. Fitness and pools down, so we combine those numbers. All these numbers are available on our website in the stats report, okay? So you can go take a look at it. But it was not necessarily the pools, it was fitness. Less people coming in. We were closed for a couple weeks and so forth. So that would make sense. So that was down by 11.7%. Tennis, outdoor activity, up 25%. Gun range, up 17.9%, boat registrations up 19%. These are huge numbers. If, in a normal year, if you had a 2, 3, 4% increase, you'd be pretty happy. But these are big numbers. Now, what's interesting is you can't necessarily determine, because of the complexity of the events, how much of this increase was due to COVID and how much of it was because we lowered the rates with the 2020 plan. Hard to say, really hard to say. It's a combination of the two. Your guess is as good as mine how much each one contributed. All right, here's the income statement. These are clearly unaudited because this is April. So April year to date, and in red is actual, in blue is budget, and in green is prior. So you determine what you want to compare it to, but also recognize if you're comparing anything to 2020, it's not the best comparison. Not the best comparison. But the numbers are really good. So revenue has increased by $600,000 over budget and $1 million over prior year. So we're doing very well. I referenced golf rounds are still, our golf rounds this year are up even more so than last year. So we continue to do very good on the golf side. Boat registrations are up. Everything's really doing well. And now that the gym facilities are open more, those numbers are up. Expenses, operating expenses have decreased compared to budget by $600,000 and compared to prior year by $300,000. So we have a couple different things. Expenses are made up of regular expenses and then labor. So let's talk about labor. Labor is down, and part of that is we're struggling, like a lot of businesses, to fill positions. Okay? If you look on our website, you'll see how many positions we have available. And our wages, quite frankly, right now are not competitive enough. On the expense side, our expenses are down, but some of that is timing, meaning the expense, because remember, we had a tough winter. And so some of those expenses that we thought we were going to spend, we had planned to spend in January, February, or March, potentially haven't spent that yet. So when I say timing, that means that, okay, we're better than budget by $600,000, but not all of that is true savings because some of that is timing where the expense will hit a little bit low later on. So I reference that because you may be looking at the financials in May or June and go, well, why are your expenses over budget? Because we're catching up. Because remember that snowstorm we had? That stuff. All right, so EBITDA, wow, we're starting the year really strong. $1.1 million better than budget and $1.3 million better than prior year. Once again, prior year, not the best comparison. But I wasn't going to throw up 2019 up there because then we have the fire and we're comparing ourselves against the fire. So really I'll give you a bunch of different comparisons, but you have to put an asterisk next to every single one and say, is that really something you want to compare to? All right, so we want to remind everybody that the 56th annual meeting is next year on May 17th, 2022. And the board of directors would like to acknowledge the time and commitment of our committee members, our three committees, the golf, lakes, and rec. They put a lot of time and effort in, and we really appreciate it. And all our community volunteers, we really appreciate that. Special recognitions. Roxy, are we doing that now, or are we doing that next week at the next? She's giving me a blank look, so we're doing it next week. All right, open forum, 3-minute limit. We have a microphone up here. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to come up and ask myself or any board member. If I can get this thing turned on. Or if nobody's going to come and ask a question, then I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Martha, did you have a question? Did you want to come up? Since this isn't cooperating, I'll have you talk into that.
What, this one?
Yeah, how about that?
Okay, thank you. Okay, since '99 when we moved up here, I have walked my dogs and mostly around the wooded areas or close to the woods. And way back about 3 or 4 years ago, I came to a meeting and I gave them a newspaper clipping of an outfit that goes to 6 or 7 states, and they take out, cut down the vines on the trees. And they had took out 20 tons of vines in Fayetteville. That's why it was in the paper. And I know this is kind of a stupid thing for me to come to this meeting and talk about, but we're a tree city. And I go around every night, I'm heading out with my dogs covered with DEET. And I see all these vines destroying these beautiful trees, especially down behind Papa Mike's. There's trees 200 or 300 years old and covered with huge, massive vines going up. So my suggestion is to the powers that be, let's get just 2 or 4 men out, maybe 3 or 4 hours through the week a day, and have them cut down these vines. Sure, they'll grow back, but you know, we'll just have to keep doing it on a yearly basis, keep going these men round and round, just 3 or 4 hours a day. And that's about it. That's all I wanted to say. It's very important to me that we do something about the vines. We're a tree city. We're not going to be a tree city 50 years from now if you keep letting these vines go crazy. Okay? Thanks a lot for listening to me, okay? Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I thank you to the candidates for running. Really appreciate it. As we indicated earlier, volunteerism is what makes Bella Vista special. Everybody have a very enjoyable evening. Thank you.